Two more. Back here. Alrighty, well, the doors closed, and let's rock and roll. Okay, first of all, I'm Jeff Goff, working for Evazon LLC in Romania, the heart of Transylvania, the home of YAPC EU 2016, yay. After 3 years, Amelia finally managed to do it. Third time's a charm. But we're not here to talk about YAPC. We're at YAPC. Instead, we're here to talk about a new variant on Dancer. How many of you are familiar with the current Perl 5 Dancer framework? Anyone? Okay, a good portion. Excellent. Excellent. All right. The good news is that when I'm trying to make things very easy to actually use. As an aside, I'm going to show more of a more minimalist Perl 6 style of code. So parens and braces will not be visible all that much because that's at least how I interpret, and I don't know what Larry would say about Perl 6 style in general. So be ready for that. There are really 4 things that you need to know in order to set up a running Prancer application, aside from basic Perl. You need to know how to use a module. Use and then module name, just like you would in Perl 5. You need to know how to use a root, as you would in Dancer. There are some differences here. In Dancer and Perl 5, you would traditionally have this /1234 or /ID be a string or /: name. In Perl 6, thankfully, you can how should I put this? You can introspect pretty much every aspect of a subroutine. So we can cut our interface down to just this bit right here. So in order to create a root, you use the isRoot adjective. The get over here is the get method. And you might be saying to yourself, how would I be able to run more than one get method if you have sub? Well, the answer is pretty simple, because now Perl 6 is polymorphic, that's not the proper term, has multi-method dispatch, so you can have multiple signatures. So you can have your own /root declared. You can have a /admin/ directory declared. You can declare your own path to a full REST URL. And Perl 6 will sort all that out and call the right function for you, along with just a little bit of magic on the Prancer side. Internally, all you really need to know in order to use, say, more complex things such as sessions and templates is the $* Prancer variable. For those of you that have not seen the $, this is how you create a variable that you can access inside another scope without declaring it inside the scope. So for instance, outside of your application, outside of your sub here, there is a variable declared, $* Prancer, and it's not passed in, but it is accessible. So this is how we manage to do things such as sessions and templates and basically anything else that needs dynamic access to application state. This is how you will look for, say, form variables. This is where you would go to edit your header content. So everything is directed through this variable, which happens to be, of course, a href. I'm using a deliberately simplistic Perl 6 style using the brace quote, ordinarily you would use the angle bracket around session, but for those of you in the audience that aren't as familiar or comfortable with Perl 6 notation, I'm going to use this notation throughout in order to help ease things along. And of course, you also have your regular helpers. Here, dynamic file needs no actual state, and dynamic file reads from the static / directory in your Perl 6 Prancer application. So this already is almost a fully functioning application. All you need to do is add the Prance method, and this file is a fully working dynamic application. So you have a static directory of content elsewhere on the drive that Prancer automatically accesses, or you can have a dynamic path. And by the way, you'll notice that post site that this is just a regular variable, and there is an implied / here. If you'll look over here, the / here is the root of your application, your directory hierarchy. So this is where you would store anything that is a dynamic application. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we go on, because there are a lot of neat little things that you can do in Perl 6, which I built into the Prancer core. And by the way, this is all right now on GitHub. The current version is right now only on my hard drive, but by the end of the GAPC, it will be out there and hopefully fixed again. I tend to break things as we all do during development. So let's get a little bit more into depth. We've talked about the post ID and how we haven't talked much about sessions. Those are managed internally. You can create your own session manager. By default, it uses a YAML file. But everything is driven through, again, the session URL. If you have, not session URL, but session href. If you have, you can add a user ID or a post ID coming in from some outside source. Moving on. Okay. Now, earlier I alluded to the fact that it's probably a little bit hard to have more than one get function. But luckily in Perl 6, what you can do is you can change from sub to multi. And that lets you have more than one subroutine with the same signature. With the same name, with a different signature. So in this case, for instance, if you are in a web browser and you curl to a address, make a GET request to /1234, this method gets run automatically for you. If the user goes to this URL, DrForr Perl 6 app Prancer, instead it runs this get method for you. And if you like, we can go into a little bit more of the details. But what I do is, as part of the isRoute adverb, what I do is put the function onto a list of functions that gets called. So there's a large hash stored internally. And when Crust, which is the bottom layer of the Prancer app stack, receives a web request, it goes through and dispatches based on that. And that's all in a separate module, so anyone that wants to use that separately, that wants this type of interface without having to have a web interface available, can pull that out as a separate routes module. So that's available for anyone to use. Now, you'll note we have a post ID down here, which could be an integer, could be a string. We're not quite sure. Perl 6 right now, in my current implementation, doesn't care about that at the moment. But if we go along and add a obvious string here and string here, this now is a typed variable. So this URL here would not be used for, say, get/1234/Perl6 because Perl 6 and the application know enough to dispatch based on the type. So you have an integer type in a route. You have a string type in your route. And the variables here automatically get populated. So the DrForr here gets populated as the username in your variables. Instead of in Dancer, you have, route parameters or parameters. You have to call that separately inside the Perl subroutine. In Perl 6 and Prancer, you no longer need to do that. Everything is parsed out for you. And any combination of string and int, or even say date or date time or JSON is processed for you automatically. So if you have any combination of integer, string, wildcard, or ISO date format. Yeah.
Is there something in Prancer that's coercing what before to an int so that it actually works?
Coercing this down to an int. This you're referring to this here, or?
1, 2, 3, 4. How is it not a string? It's also a string.
Okay. In that case, it's simply an untyped variable, and those take precedence, or rather, those give up precedence. So if you had, say, a separate handler of multi-get int ID versus multi-get $ID, the int would take precedence in this place.
Okay, but something in your code that must be coercing 1, 2, 3, 4 from a string to int.
Not coercing per se. It does cast internally. Yeah. But the important thing here is that you're able to distinguish between a name like DrForr and an integer like 1, 2, 3, 4, and those processed separately. Yeah, that's all. Again, you see this work in the test suite. I'll show you here in a few minutes. Yeah. All right. And again, any combination of string, int, and non-typed, with the proviso that date is processed first, followed by string, followed by integer, followed by anything in the hierarchical order. So it acts as fallback, so you can have any combination. Yeah. Like so. Here is the last. This is in the inverse order. So actually, this will get assigned first, followed by date, followed by integer, followed by string, followed by argument. In terms of, in order of increasing scope, if you will. Because of course, in Perl 6, a string can be eventually, a string can contain an integer value without being an integer itself. So that's why that is in that order. These stars here, I don't have that right now on the CPAN archive. I'm sorry, on the modules Perl org archive. That functionality isn't there yet. But hopefully by the end of YAPC, that will be released. Okay. You may also be wondering how you use, say, a REST type URL, if you're more familiar with that type of with that type. So we have a post here, the term post for, say, a blog post for, say, perl.org, followed by an ID. So what Perl 6 internally does, along with Prancer, when you have it strips out these slashes, matches the post, and these slashes, by the way, here are optional. You can remove those or add those as you wish, either before or after or as separate values. You have complete freedom. My personal style here would be generally to include them, just for clarity's sake. But that's your option. And again, if you're doing a handler, there's already, in Dancer, you only have 2 lines of code, one to perform the get call with the string and the colon parameters, and another line to get the ID value. And in this case, not only does it find the matching ID, but it gives you a handy variable right there at that point. You can do this, I think, now in 524 as well, with subroutine signatures, but I don't think that you could introspect to this level. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that Perl 5 signatures yet have this detail of signature introspection. So I'm actually going through, and as part of the route handler, picking apart each argument here. And by the way, for those of you that are new to both subroutine signatures and seeing this string there in an actual argument, this actually works because that is a constrained string. So it actually uses treat it as if it were constant, effectively. So if you were, say, working on the command line or calling for somewhere else, you would actually call in get parent and then /post followed by a random post ID and have that called inside your Prancer application. So it's also another way to do redirects. Instead of having a separate redirect method, you simply call your next function in the chain. So you get rid of redirects. You get rid of at least one line in your Perl 5 code, and you also decouple the fact that you have a colon ID, and later on in the function you have to either process a stack or call wrap parameter on that. So now you just have a single value here, already available for you. And of course, you need to work with more than just obsolete get and methods. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting, because you've seen beforehand this syntax here with multiple parameters leading to multiple lines. And again, you can have any combination you like of string, integer, constant, and whatnot. And even eventually, I will allow the use of stars and regular expressions inside here as well, because that's allowed in Dancer. I don't really see much of a use for it in general, but it's good to have it available, and it's part of the detail engine. Pardon me. So you have so here you're doing, again, a straight curl to your web page, curl to the server with post command /login. And you have a username being passed in and a password. So again, we have /login here and /login as the handler. One-to-one relationship between the URL and the route. And again, all of this stuff down here is regular Perl 6 code. So the only things that we've added to make your web application work as a full web application is we've only really added here the is route, and we've added inside here the star Prancer variable. So you can access inside the form content. We can get the username and password here as a variable. Username and password as part of the form. And also there is a separate Prancer-env, so if you need to access, say, headers, or you need to look at session content or add cookies or do cookie manipulation on your own, you can access that. And of course, as I alluded to earlier, this is how one does a redirect. You simply call the new method. This up here as well, I don't know if I have a slide for this, but you can also use this. I believe I show you later on how to do get parameters as well. Okay. Allow me to add here. And that will be how one accesses a optional variable. I'm not sure if I have a slide for this, so I'm jumping ahead a bit possibly. But again, we have two methods here trained in that fashion. So slashes combine in a fashion, followed by a optional foo. So this will get called on either get/admin/profile or get/admin/profile with the question mark modifier here, because this is indeed a optional variable. Okay. All right. The last major thing here, and I'll go through a little bit more of the code in the background and show it working here soon, is how you deal with templates here. There is a slight bug in the web template handling engine I'm using that I will patch here, hopefully today. But you can use Prancer.template and summon a regular HTML template. This is the configuration, so you can use whatever engine you like in the background. We have the choice of HTML template, a template toolkit-ish variant, at least 3 engines I know of right now. I don't think that we have a Mason-style engine, but I wouldn't use that for the setup. But again, it's all, that's all configurable in the application itself. Let's see here. I did include. And finally, dealing with, you can add your own headers here with a separate content type and return JSON. Because Perl 6 is, the engine is smart enough to know that if you have if you're returning a JSON object, it will actually return and handle a it will actually handle and return a JSON object and set the headers for you, so you don't have to actually do this step here. It's smart enough to know the type return. Right now, it's set up only to handle HTML and JSON. Other types will probably include XML once we have an XML parser, but that may be extreme overkill. So if you don't want to use an XML parser and return, format, and validate XML, you can always set your header type as you like. Okay. But before we go into too much of this more detail, you probably want to see something actually working. And by the way, I'm not going to show this right now because at one time there was a bug in the Crust core that I accidentally tickled. But as it stands, under Siege, with a little bit of tweaking, I can handle upwards of 200 consecutive sessions. I'm sorry, not consecutive, concurrent sessions. All doing access. So in terms of performance, we have, it's actually performant as opposed to a toy prototype. If you want to test this yourself, you do right now have to set a Recruito variable to expand the number of concurrent sessions. Ask me details later on if you like. But this is a fully functioning web application. Basically, I stole the HTML content is my own, and because I live in Romania, Google decided to translate the cookies into Romanian for me. But this is a fully functioning application. with actual web content. This is mostly static content driven off of a dynamic request. But I'll show you the actual code here in a few minutes. And again, going back to localhost, proving that this is actually the application in the background, and we can see it at work. I turned trace off, so there's no actual output here, but, and this is a bug in my own code. But this is the application here running much like you would a normal Dancer application. The only change down here is instead of, you have Perl 6-I. In Dancer, you have plaque up, bin/application. In our case, you have, instead of plaque up, you have Perl 6-I lib. And aside from this, the server is now ready again to run. Again, this is Romanian, I apologize. And again, this is all served off my local laptop on a local VM. So hopefully proving that it's not indeed as slow as people claim. You can do basic web applications on your laptop. If I had a full desktop machine, it would be much faster. I don't personally have that right now because I do all my small apartment, and I haven't bought a actual desktop machine. But in terms of performance, it's doing fine. At least it works for me. So again, it is practical. It handles, again, at least 200 consecutive sessions. It does manage sessions. You could add your own database management with a DBI. I was hoping to have a full wiki available before YAPC, but unfortunately work intervened. I got to the point of using SQLite on the back end and creating session management and using the current Markdown module in Perl 6 to work. I will keep everyone posted via Twitter and Facebook, etc. when this is actually ready to go. But let's take a look a little bit at the actual code running. All right. This is a simple implementation of a Prancer application at the start. Instead, obviously, of Perl 5, you have Perl 6. App Prancer roots is the only module that you need to load. This handles all of the basics. This creates down here the root. This creates roots, and this is the old Prancer section code inside here. I've since changed that. But it also creates this fairly simple, just a test cookie with type with the value key of X value 42. And along here, you see a lot of the different kinds of roots that you can create. And again, this is equivalent of fees post default :alt. If you will, :alt or some other alternative in Dancer. That's equivalent thereof. You have fees slash post slash default, and then question mark alt equal RSS. We can take a look at that. I seem to have lost my RSS feed section. But again, there's a lot of HTML. However, again, these are all dynamic. All these down here, you'll see, it's hard to see on my laptop, but down here, you see that this is in fact a static HTML file fed by Prancer. Again, hard to see, and I apologize, but you have a profile and then profile ID, and these are all generated by the handlers. What you saw there was profile slash and then a defined integer profile ID. This is what gets called. Profile slash and then a integer here. That's function. One-to-one mapping between your URL with the type and with your code down here. Profile and then a integer. One-to-one. And this also lets you, if you have, say, if you have multiple applications going on. Thank you. If you have, say, multiple applications or multiple versions of an app that you're trying to merge. This also lets you let Perl do all the heavy lifting, and it will report instead of you having to go through your dance application and find out that you have two URL handlers for the same root. This lets Perl do all the work for you, and it will report instead that you have a root conflict. So Perl 6 does the lifting for you. Search here. Right now I'm doing this as a string, but it will take this date time and parse that into a date for you as well. So I could go in the new version, I'd have to find, and update that from stir to date or date time, and let it do the work for me. And it just goes through and magically, as it were, creates a new root for its search with a search slash timestamp, and that is the if then else simulating database access. Like so. And that's again running the accessor here with search, and then passing in a update min and update max string and optional max results. Here I'm simulating how you would access a database or any sort of static content on the drive. I can go through and show a lot more of the inner workings. Do we have questions going on? Anything interesting, or have I covered the? One back. Sorry.
About those date and time types, are those like built in through Prancer, or are they like core types in Perl 6, or
Okay. Question is the date time here that would be used in the code. Yes, those are in fact core Perl 6 built-ins. So if you want to, you theoretically could even default to. You could even take a date here, update. Set a default to now, and search and use your search for that. But yes, they are built-ins. Right.
Is the configuration for Prancer very similar to Dancer with the YAML files, the loggers, stuff
Okay, the question was, is Dancer configuration based around Prancer configuration based around same as Dancer? That is my intent, yes. I haven't gone to that point yet to have a proper configuration file. Most of what I see here is right now hard code, as I don't yet know quite how I'm going to arrange the actual configuration. But the intent is to have this be a proper static configuration file. So you can use, I'm thinking actually either JSON or a straightforward .ini file. Because the one thing that I do not want there, and this is personal preference, is any sort of Perl compile code in the configuration file. That defeats the purpose in my opinion. So when we have a proper config.json or config.ini file, it'll be static content.
What about the loggers that can be a built-in or a plug-in type, being to change the logger and format the loggers? Kind of like a log for Perl.
Okay, I do have something similar to that right now. One moment. I think that's variable. Yes. Yeah, this is a trace dump. I'll show you an actual load here in a second. But the intent is to have something similar to how Apache does its logging with a sprintf style configuration file. Yeah. But this also lets you see what the application is actually trying to process, and internally how this is all working. Internally, you see here we have the default root, which is slash, a feed slash, and then an int type, because thankfully pound cannot be part of the URL, so I chose to use that as a marker. And pound int. I don't have a stir type here apparently in the sample, but we certainly can add that later on, and that may also be a further bug in the application, because this should be registering the optional application variables. Again, a lot of this is based around the fact that both Perl 6 signature types are incredibly flexible, and more importantly, they you can introspect from Perl 6 code. So there is no equivalent thereof of excess going on here. There is no trickery that you would use in, say, Dancer to go in and look for lexical values or play with scoping. This is all done using pure Perl 6 and the incredibly powerful introspection and signature analysis that we have. Just to give you a little bit of idea of how you go around poking around inside the internals of a function method. Of a function or a method. This routine here gets called when you see the isRoot declaration done. So what it's doing here is it's taking a routine, which is the entire Perl 6 code that gets passed in, and looking over the signature, which will be, of course, the variables that get passed in at each point. Parsing those out, ignoring them if they're optional. That's the bug that I was alluding to a few minutes ago. And translating if it has an actual name, i.e. if it's not a constant like quote/post quote. If it's a integer or a stir type. Yeah. This takes as the pound here and the type, or it just turns the parameter goes a little bit deeper into the constant and pulls out the string inside that and creates it as a name. So this is actually right here the core of what you see going on in the background of the Prancer application. Every application, every method call that you see doing the is root analysis is all running through this one function. So this is essentially the core, and it's less than screenful. It does have a few helpers here. Param2 string could be bumped down a little bit, but that's essentially it. And we take a look at that down here. I'm not quite sure why I needed the for block here, and I'm still playing around with Perl 6 style, so the for block is probably not necessary to do, but in essence, all of the manipulation that you see here, doing all of the type introspection and analysis is all done in roughly 10 lines of code. There are some helpers here that do more of the heavy lifting here. I assume I had a point for name that's strung rather than string, past tense. But this here is still very much not yet Perl 6 style, as I haven't yet decided what my Perl 6 style is. Yeah. So I keep changing on basically a weekly basis, and now that I've been to one or two of Damien's talks, I'll have to go home for about a week and recover. All right. One more minute here. Anyone else have questions? Yeah. And by the way, I tried to write this code as straightforward as possible, instead of trying to condense it down to Damien level two-line operators. So that way I can go in and fix it when I forget what's going on after 5 or 6 beers. Or after Damien talks again. Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Anyone else? Questions or comments? Ideas? Uh-huh.
So when will ACT be rewritten in Prancer?
Well, you know, I alluded earlier to the fact that this morning to the fact that I'm also working on blogs.perl.org, and I'm hoping that this might prove as a replacement here in a few months' time. I don't know. Amalia, we need to talk at some point. Hi. Yeah, and a little by the way. My intent at one point is to try to add this as a separate test bed alongside the current blogs.perl.org, which is now kind of being transitioned to another team. Or rather, I'm now working on 2 different teams, so I'm doing team management for the current blogs.perl project, so I'm hoping to do this as a side. So I'm hoping to have eventually a blogs.perl.org powered by Perl 6, but we'll have to see. And again, the application as it stands is probably stable enough to handle the load we're seeing right now on current blogs.perl.org, so I feel fairly confident that it could be done. I just need to talk with Tokihiro and the other members of the Crust team to talk about how we want to go forward, because there's a new P6 GI as opposed to the current Perl 5 plaque spec that is being talked about. So once that's done, I will port the application here over to the new stack and have a more performant. Yes. Okay.
First slide, like in your very first small example code, think like the.
Yeah, when you're ready.
What?
That one?
Yeah, you said that my user, you said that was a hash, right?
No. Okay, Prancer.session is a hash ref. This is the current session inside Prancer. So you have, say, star Prancer.brace session and .brace form, and eventually, and also .env if you want access to anything else. I just chose to use session and form because they were easy to write out. I know that in Dancer, this is all done by a separate DSL, and you would have a standalone function called session or called root parameters. I chose not to do that because I felt that having the dynamic variables, what's called here, the $, was a lot cleaner, and lets me expand as well because this way I can create a separate. I can turn this entire Prancer thing into an object and then let you create whatever you want to in terms of overriding or adding roles, instead of me having to come up with all of the fun stuff and create a separate module pluggable mechanism. This way you can create your own role subclass, and add in a role that does what you want to manage. Okay, and if there are no more questions, anyone? All right, I think we are done. Thank you very much.